Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale a business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Stefan, the general partner at Latin Leap. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Good to be with you.
My pleasure. And so you have an amazing experience as operator and now as investor as well. And we would love to get to know more about you and to discuss some of the lessons learned during your path on those both capacities. So who is Stefan for the ones who are listening to us?
Briefly, Mike, Stefan is a German that has been around in Latin America for the past decade, mainly involved in tech entrepreneurship and venture investing. As you correctly pointed out, I started off as an operator and a few e-commerce businesses, the Rocket Internet and a few others self-funded. Basically in Spanish-speaking Latin America, from Argentina up to Mexico, and am based out of Colombia currently, and have been, as of late, starting to invest in local early stage opportunities in Latin America, and also through Latin Leap, we are focusing on the connection of international tech scale-ups into Latin America.
Awesome. It would be good for the ones who are listening to us, kind of explaining also what is kind of your thesis in terms of early stage VC investment.
So we've seen a few things. First of all, that Latin America, as some of your audience might know, is rather large and heterogeneous continent. So many times founders, so when they're trying to internationalize from one country to another, being it, for instance, from Colombia to Mexico or vice versa, are not familiar with the markets in these other countries from their perspective. And where Latin Leap and a syndicate that we have been forming comes in is by providing advice and networks on the ground in each of these countries to help facilitate the expansion and try to avoid a typical pitfall that local founders could potentially fall into when expanding in the region.
And definitely that's one of the main risks of scaling up across the region. You mentioned Spanish-speaking countries in LATAM. That's your main focus as well, right? Over there.
Yes, we're mainly focused on what's called the Pacific Alliance, which is basically comprised out of Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, and typically see companies expanding in these parts first before they will consider the big elephant in the room, which is Brazil, obviously. Companies that are starting out increasingly, and I think this has also been changing over the course of the last 10 years, when the usual second market of Europe, Chilean, Peruvian, or Colombian founder, the natural expansion market 10 years ago used to be Brazil by its sheer size. But nowadays, Mexico, for instance, is top of mind for these guys. And usually what we see also is that after the second round of funding, the initial founders, even if they come from smaller countries, are then moving effectively to for instance, Mexico, and then expanding the business in a larger market.
Exactly. So, of course, in the Spanish-speaking side of LATAM, definitely Mexico is the largest market, and kind of at a certain point, especially if you come from the other Pacific Alliance countries, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, that would be the objective to get into Mexico and to scale up in Mexico before, as you're saying, considering Brazil in the region or even other regions across the world.
That's correct.
And I believe that the same as it happens, I know that you have a passion like myself about LATAM and also Southeast Asia. We see a lot the tendency of those players and those founding teams and leadership teams to have the aim or the dream of becoming regional players. So there is still the dream of being the LATAM leader or the Southeast Asia leader. So those kind of regions are not thinking too much outside of those regions. It makes me think also about Europe. Not Europe, it's in different way, because the European scale-ups are want to become European leaders or want to expand directly into the US. Or if we think about Iberian scale-ups, some of them will also choose to jump into LATAM. But there is a tendency clearly in LATAM and Southeast Asia to have the aim of becoming regional players, but not the ambition of becoming global players. And what I'm listening more and more in LATAM is also this attempt of trying to challenge entrepreneurs to think a little bit more globally. But at the same time, if we think too much global, we might lose focus, and we know that focus is critical in order to scale up effectively. Trying to do too many things at the same time is the death kiss in a certain way. What are your thoughts, that given that you are, as you said, German with strong experience in LATAM, and that you have also a global outlook in terms of starting up and scaling up? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is a very tricky question, and it exactly describes the dilemma that founders are faced on. We don't see too many Latin American startups and scale-ups that have been successful somewhere else in the world, which might, on the one hand, be a lack of vision. This could be a hypothesis. On the other hand, also effectively, global competition levels are much different than we see them in Latin America. So I would say there's a few exceptions. If we're looking at, for instance, VTEX, Brazilian e-commerce company that has also started to do business in Asia and elsewhere. But I also tend to see, and I think this is this also has to do with the moment in which we are right now, and where capital is becoming more a scarce resource for expansion. That I particularly don't mind founders that first of all think about the region and becoming a regional champion. It's talking about the 650 million inhabitant market, which is large enough. And the fact that if you are a leader in Colombia, for instance, it does not necessarily qualify you to be a leader in Mexico, yeah, or vice versa. So these markets need to be conquered and dominated as well first, yeah, which is a challenge in its own right. Sometimes I see founders in Latin America, when they have a presence in, suppose, Peru and Colombia, they think, okay, Latin America is already check marked, yeah, which is not the case.
Right.
So I believe local founders do good in really establishing a local presence. Sometimes even becoming a national champion is also enough, so to speak, to be an attractive M&A target or to realize an exit in some form. So don't underestimate. In my time as an operator, I've seen time and time again the dangers also of internationalizing too quickly.
Right.
and on the one hand, founder ambition, and on the other hand, feasibility, and the possibility of losing focus, as you mentioned. So I believe not necessarily one needs to have a global ambition to start the business. Yeah. And then, as you know, as the business grows, the cap table changes, opportunities change. Also, a global perspective can arise, certainly. Yeah. Sometimes the same founders are the right people to do so. Sometimes not even. No, those that were the right people to ramp up a business are not necessarily the ones to lead it into the global enterprise.
Right. But in a certain way, to be fair with all the regions, again, it's not criticizing any of the founders that are doing an amazing job. In a certain way, the US focus in the US, Europe, maybe it's more connected with the US, LATAM, and a few incursions in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia focus on Southeast Asia, of course. China focus on China, India. In India, so that's kind of a pattern across all regions to focus more in the specific region. Curiously, I think that's the main exception is Europe in a certain way, that is more open to other regions, maybe because of the history itself, of the size of the markets from where the entrepreneurs come from, that they don't have another option not to look outside and to consider what would be the best region to expand to. But definitely, I think that you nailed the point of the timing of the expansion being critical. We discuss it so much on the show on when to move from Europe to the US, if you don't have the resources, or if it is the wrong timing. If it is too early, it might be too late because the American competitor is already leading the category. If it is too early, you might not have the resources and you might kill the company while trying to expand the company. But focusing more on LATAM and on your lessons learned, expanding from one country to another with more focus on Spanish-speaking ones in the Pacific Alliance, as you said. What are the main lessons learned? What are the main mistakes that you see founders make on your portfolio, or what are your tips or advice for the ones who are facing those challenges?
So it's obvious that it's a heterogeneous set of challenges, and maybe picking out one single factor does not reflect the reality. I think they're numerous. One potentially is not recognizing the idiosyncrasies of every market. So obviously, as you want to build a tech business, you're trying to look at a problem always with the same set of tools to solve it, being it in Peru, being it in Ecuador, being it in Colombia, and so forth. So you are tempted to say, I need to build a streamlined organization and I cannot hyper-localize too much. Yeah. At the same time, in Latin America, and you are making the comparison, is we are not in the European Union. So people are tempted to say, okay, they also speak Spanish, they are similar, our neighbors.
Good point.
But it turns out it's a complete different legal system, and the competitive environment and the local labor laws, the currency, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the currency is different, and so the barriers to entry are different, and also sometimes it's the time it takes to localize, being it through a local payment gateway, being it through local talent that is required, local communication, takes longer than one initially would anticipate. I think this is part of the message. Also because if you are a B2B business, for instance, and you're trying to sell goods and services to or services more than anything to corporate. Usually the local champions are different from the ones that you knew in your home country. Yeah? So there are obviously a few multi-Latina, which can be a great way, but usually you have the largest local customers are local customers that need to be acquired from scratch. So the commercial job needs to be redone in every country. Yeah? And all this takes time. So underestimating these challenges can be, or what I sometimes see is a component that founders need to be well aware of.
Yeah, you see it, we see it that of course founders that come from larger countries have a tendency to stay more time in the domestic market because they have a larger domestic market, and founders that come from smaller countries have a more regional or global mindset because they need to leave the domestic market as quickly as possible because the domestic market is too small. I'm thinking, of course, we know that Chile in a certain way is maybe it's the smallest country of the Pacific Alliance, but maybe the most developed and the most mature market in across those four. So do you see any kind of patterns from entrepreneurs that are coming out of Chile and Peru compared to and Colombia compared to the ones who are coming out of Mexico that maybe can focus, let's say, until Series A or even Series B, just expanding in Mexico and becoming leaders in Mexico before considering other countries outside of Mexico?
Yeah, it's effectively as you're describing it, and also as I mentioned earlier, so founders out of Chile, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia are naturally obliged to expand to a larger market fairly quickly in order to become at least a regional player and therefore more of an attractive target for specifically VC money. At the same time, the same that I mentioned earlier holds also true, and sometimes I see even founders coming from these countries with too much ambition and let's say too fast of a desire to expand at a level where if you're talking to them and for instance it's a company that does 100K USD ARR or in a B2B space or let's say as turnover B2C company has transactional turnover of less than $1 million on an annualized basis in Chile and Peru, and said, okay, we proved the case and we have to now expand to Mexico. And then when we go back and say, okay, so if you're doing $1 million or less in a country like Peru, is that it? I mean, is this all the Peruvian market can give your business model? So, and if this is the conclusion, then I mean, good luck. Yeah, Mexico might be 4 or 5 times larger. Okay, this is true. Or depending on the business model, anything between 3 and 10x is possible. We see this, but it's still fairly low then, no? So if this is your entire addressable market, then yeah, maybe you should stick around in your home country a little longer, and then until there's more traction. So I'm trying to say this, yeah. So if you're looking to let's say get your lifeline or rescue the business, you think traction is becoming a little difficult for XYZ reason, and say no, we just have to quickly enter into Mexico, and then all will be fine, and our numbers will start to grow aggressively again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something to consider is that even in the domestic market, we can already have proven a little bit of, not at those numbers as you are saying, but a little bit of product market fits. And assuming that we are at the right timing to expand into a second market, sometimes we have developed a little bit more of the scale-up mindset, and we need to come back that when we are expanding into a new market, we need to go through product market fit again. So it's kind of creating a new startup from the scratch, of course, with some experience in the region. But as you said, the markets might be so different that we need to prove all the hypotheses again, and be super open, and not assume that everything will be super easy, and also consider the timing to get the results and the investment needed, because again, the game of VC is a speed game, and if we need to go from startup to scale up another 3 years, let's go from 0 to 1 million ARR, for instance, another 3 years, it might be too late to expand the company from 1 to 5 million to go from Series A to Series B. So the numbers don't make so, which means that we still need to grow a lot from the domestic markets, and to plant the seeds to then gain momentum to go from the 5 to 10 million ARR, for instance, in the new market. And those timings and that calculation, of course, it's super difficult to do and super risky when expanding.
Correct.
And in that sense, a good point as well is sometimes we forget that the idea of the VC game is really to create an 100 million player. And if we are only having revenues of 100K or 200K, I'm talking in dollars, it might be difficult. How many countries we will add into the table. This will increase a lot of the complexity, which will slow down the scaling up stage. So the odds are all against us. If we need to be a global player to have 100 million in business, this will be very, very difficult. Maybe we need, as you said, to be a global player when we go into 1B or 10B. We already made the IPO. The VC investors already made their exits. That's another stage that unfortunately very few companies in the world are able to make. So I would say that even getting to 100 million is a very difficult challenge, and we know this, and it's part of the VC rules and of the VC odds, and everyone is comfortable, and we all need, especially as founders, to understand what are the rules of the game before embarking on that game or on that system to scale up the company. Cool. Any other thoughts that you think would be interesting for the ones listening in LATAM who are considering expansion across those 4 countries? Any other thoughts that you see? Any other patterns, advice, even from your own operator experience in the region?
Yeah. So I mean, one thing is to be repeated. Go fast, but not too fast. No. So yeah. So try to be quick, but don't overdo it. No, which may fall back on you. And then I think that there is also a topic on choosing the right market where to go next. There's potentially 2 different ways to look upon on this, and not necessarily one is better than other. I think it depends very much on the business model. So one is to say, okay, we have to go after the TAM, the total addressable market, and so in order to be relevant to certain VCs, we have to be in Mexico as our next market. Yeah, right. And this is otherwise we can't collect VC money. Sometimes this may hold true in terms of the logic that you are mentioning. We have to do total dollars of X, Y, Z in order to qualify, etc. Sometimes, on the other hand, larger markets are also more competitive. Other folks are already there. Yeah, and it might also be have more friction to enter such a market. Whereas if we are looking at the smaller market, maybe for instance from a Colombian perspective, Ecuador, yeah, we can say, okay, it's a smaller market, but we can become number one in this market fairly quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even a smaller business can be, depends if we're looking for short-term profitability or not, but I'll say it can be a profitable operation, or at least contribution margin can be higher, etc. When we don't face too much competition in acquiring customers and on the price level as well. So this needs to be taken into account. Also, if you're seeing at who are some of the region's largest companies, usually those come from the banking sector, from the energy. Let the energy sector apart, with mining and so forth, which is a little bit a specific situation, but usually it's banking and retail. Yeah, so supermarkets and those guys, and banking institutions. Now, if you're looking at these, you have a few players that are actually very profitable champions in smaller countries, because they dominated those countries, and Central America as a region, and the countries there are a good example to say, okay, I can be number one. I can almost create a monopolistic situation, and the markets will not be attractive for someone else to get into this, because they are not large enough for 2 or 3 players. And if I already built up a brand there and already acquired customers, there can be a loyal customer base. And so those are, I would say, the 2 things to be carefully considered, depending on overall plans for the company.
Right. So two things to think about for the ones listening. First, clearly the timing, and second, the trade-off. Ensure that you will clearly have a leadership position, or you are already close to a leadership position before embarking to a new country, and ensure that you also have the resources to attack that new country, especially if it is a larger one. That you might face much more competition, which means that you would need more resources and more time to conquer the markets, and a better differentiation, and to be able to compete face to face with those players who are trying again to win the region. Because if we have local players coming from Peru, from Chile, all from Colombia, all trying to win Mexico, that's the place where they will face each other, and they will battle to be the leaders in the category across the region.
Yes, as a founder, ask yourself, does it make more sense for my business to be number 3 in Mexico or number 1 in Ecuador?
Yeah,
for instance. Yeah, what options do arise from these situations, in terms of exit, in terms of total value of the company, but also in terms of risk. Yeah, because if I don't make it in Mexico, and I'm at number 3 or number 4, and I wasted a lot of resources, I'm not getting the traction. What does that mean for my next round? Will I even get a next funding round, or did I burn my resources? So, question to ask.
Good points. And that's why it's an art and the science related to starting up and scaling a company. There are fundamentals, but every single case, it's always different. And that's why it's not easy, and why we don't have a playbook, and we just replicate the playbook and it's done, and every single entrepreneur would be successful, and every single investor would be successful as well, right? That's part of the beauty of life. So let's go into your other angle. So as we discussed a lot, you have been focused as operator and an investor in LATAM and helping with this expansion across the region. But you also have another angle. That's the way also I found you online with a report that you published about the similarities between Southeast Asia and LATAM. And for the ones who are listening to me on the show over these 230 plus episodes, you know that I'm really passionate about these two regions, and I couldn't avoid to get in touch with you and to invite you to come into the show to leverage from your experience in LATAM, and also this report of Southeast Asian scale-ups that want to expand into LATAM. So what are your thoughts about the two regions, the similarities, some of the stuff that you have written down in the report, and why do you think that it is interesting LATAM for Southeast Asian startups or scale-ups?
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, a visit to Medellin Medellin, Colombia, by representatives of the Singaporean government was really eye-opening to me when we began to discuss parallels and similarities between the two emerging regions of this world, which is Southeast Asia and Latin America. So when you start to compare economic realities, needs, consumer needs, and also stages of development between these two regions, and also, let's say, mere economic facts such as population, GDP sizes, it's all very similar. And based on these conclusions, we began to develop a tech connection between Southeast Asia and Latin America, with Singapore as an innovation hub within this region, and detecting companies with potential to deploy their business in Latin America with solutions tailored to emerging markets. Sometimes what we see in LATAM is when international companies from Europe, from North America are trying to do business in the region. Their prospectuses, their presentation, everything looks very nice. Local customers, potential customers are impressed. When it comes down to the pricing level, most solutions are outpriced for the local market. When mature economies have to kind of include overheads in their pricing structure, it becomes very difficult sometimes for emerging market customers to simply pay for these solutions, even if they like them. And sometimes what we also saw is that again, the solutions coming out of mature economies such as Europe and again North America or can be overly sophisticated for consumers in Latin America, in more emerging regions, and are made for different demographics, simply put. In this regard, we see Southeast Asia as a great sourcing region for solutions that can, and this is a little bit where the name Latin Leap comes from, leapfrog Latin America. Okay. in different verticals that make up large parts of the GDP and help society move forward in LATAM. Now, what is it that we've also seen is that for a Southeast Asian company, it's of course exotic to consider Latin America to enter this market. It's not a straight forward approach to say, okay, Yes, of course. I'll enter into LATAM. Usually we see two types of reaction. First, a company saying, we've never thought about Latin America, but now that you're telling us how the situation looks over there and some of the opportunities you're seeing, it's an interesting market we should definitely consider. The second type of reactions that we also usually hear is that, yes, we've thought about Latin America. We know it's there. We know it's a great opportunity, but it's so far away, time zone wise, culture wise, language wise. Without a local partner, we wouldn't venture out into this market. We wouldn't know where to start. We don't feel comfortable in deploying on the other side of the world without someone locally to guide us or to align interests at least, or to co-invest with us. And this is where Let and Leap comes in our approach, where we say, okay, we pick the Southeast Asian winners and invest with them, and then be of help in the deployment phase in LATAM. Again, having recognized time and time again patterns in what a scale-up typically looks for when deploying into a new market, which is normally access to talent, regulatory navigation, tropicalization of the communication, basically, finding local customers in the end, tapping into local ecosystem, press, universities, things like that, and having also access to trusted third-party providers on the back office side, legal, accounting, and these things. So those are typically the things that we try to chip in when helping companies to enter into the market.
It makes a lot of sense, and we could have the same discussion that we had before about, again, the right timing from expanding from Southeast Asia into, or from any region into other region, in this case from Southeast Asia into LATAM. I think it's the kind of the same lessons that we were talking about LATAM, with even more importance, that's because there are more similarities cultural wise in between the countries within the region compared to other region. Then we need to be more careful with that expansion. There is higher risk. But what I'm really curious about is, do you see that the opposite direction is also an opportunity, right? So LATAM companies or scale-ups finding the right timing in order to expand into Southeast Asia. This is something that you have on your vision for the future, or do you prefer to focus on playing in LATAM and helping Southeast Asian scale-ups to come to LATAM and help the ones in LATAM to expand across LATAM?
So we've been asked many times if this tech bridge, as we sometimes call it, works both ways, which is a natural thing to ask. Now, and I'm not here to say no, it does not, but I want to also be realistic. I would love to see Latin American companies making good business in Asia, of course, but also realistically speaking, it's the Asian century, and most innovation on this planet comes from Asia. And competition levels are highest in this part of the world. So it's a little bit more straightforward to say we look at this from Asia to LATAM, first of all, and as Latin America also updates itself in many ways, then potentially both ways is also an opportunity. But in terms of priority and also on realistic success for all stakeholders involved in such an initiative, for the time being, we prefer to focus on Asia to LATAM.
That's good. Excellent point. We were talking about competition across LATAM, and definitely Southeast Asia, it's another world in what matters to competition. Great point. So this is the moment where we get into the quick question and quick answer kind of formats. So we'll have three kind of self-reflective questions for our guests and to you, and then three questions more related with resources that we'd like to recommend to other founders and investors listening to us on the show. So let's start with the first one. If you would have the opportunity to talk with Stefan at the beginning of Latin Leap, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
Think about possible pandemics to come up and how this might change your course.
Good point. Now I'd love to do a follow-up question, but it's not allowed in this segment. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
I would say do not give up on the hope of Latin America. Which I mean, as you know, or someone or all the people that have been in Latin America for quite a while, either living there or working there, there is certainly always a good level of political and economic storm somewhere in the region. So sometimes it's also easy to lose confidence, but then you always see the light and on the other side of the tunnel, and it's good to stick through.
Worst advice ever received?
I usually only tend to listen to the good advice.
Great way of answering to the question. Well done. Investor skills. And let's go into the resources. What is your favorite book?
So in fact, I recommend very much Ray Dalio, Changing World Order, in a book format or also on YouTube, I believe. Very insightful for those that have not heard about Ray Dalio. Maybe it's not so many, as he's quite well known, but I like very much his reflection and could recommend it.
That's a great resource and very related to the show that we have recorded today, talking about the regions, the dynamics, the competition, etc. So the Asian century, as you...
The rise and fall of certain empires. Yeah.
Empires, exactly. I love it. Good one. Favorite movie or series, as you wish?
I have to be honest, I hardly... ever watch TV, no Netflix, anything like this. I try to look at real time as my real world as my movie, and I'm fully occupied with this. But I did like Breaking Bad a lot. I have to say, yeah, one of the early Netflix series. I love this one very much. Yeah.
Love it. And finally, your favorite podcast, excluding this one.
I can point to the Latin Leap podcast as well, where from time to time we interview founders from our portfolio and affiliated companies in a format that is relatively traditional, but looking at the founder's perspective and its business. So it's a fresh view on some of the upcoming technology founders, both from Asia and Latin America. Please find it on Spotify and look for it. Yeah. So I would say it's clearly the #2 podcast behind Scaleup Valley.
Great one. I will check that out. Looking forward to it. Stefan, it was really a pleasure to have you on the show. You are always welcome to come back to share more lessons learned, helping companies to scale to LATAM or across LATAM. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you, Mike, and good luck.
And to our community, as you see, we keep bringing the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier, starting up and scaling up your business. See you soon and keep scaling.